If you're part of any organization, you've probably thought about web accessibility. But how do you turn those good intentions into real, lasting change? Well, it all comes down to having a plan. Today, we're going to break down the blueprint for that plan, how to build an accessibility policy right from the ground up.
So let's start with a really fundamental question. Just take a second and think about your organization's website right now. Is it genuinely, truly open to every single person, no matter their ability? This is the core reason we're talking today.
Because making your digital space truly inclusive, well, it's not about guesswork or just hoping for the best. Lasting accessibility starts with a plan, a formal policy that acts as the blueprint for everything else you do. It's what turns the vague what and why into a concrete how.
Okay, let's start with the foundation. Why do you really need a formal policy? Think of it like the central nervous system for all of your accessibility efforts. It connects everything together.
What makes a policy so powerful is its flexibility. It doesn't have to be some stuffy document locked away in a digital folder somewhere. The real magic happens when you weave it into the very fabric of your organization, right into your non-discrimination policies, your brand guidelines, even your coding standards. That's how accessibility becomes a core feature from the get-go, not just some box you have to tick at the very end. And making that policy public? Wow, that shows everyone you are absolutely serious.
All right, so you've committed to creating a policy, now you need some rules, and this is where standards come in. Think of them like the official building codes for your website. They give you clear, consistent, and internationally recognized rules to build against.
The most important one you need to know is WCAG. That's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. This is the big one. It applies to literally everything your users see and interact with. The text, the images, the forms, you name it, on any device. If you only focus on one standard to start with, this is it. It is the absolute foundation.
Next up, you've got ATAG, and this one covers the tools you use to create content. So think about your content management system. The logic here is simple, but it's brilliant. If the software your own team uses to build a website isn't accessible, how on earth can you expect them to create accessible work? ATAG makes sure accessibility starts from the inside out.
And finally, there's UAAG. This covers the software people use to access your content, things like web browsers and media players. Now, you're probably not building the next Google Chrome, but if your company develops, say, custom plugins or its own video player, this standard becomes absolutely critical. It ensures the tools your audience uses can actually work for everyone.
So, what does this look like in an actual policy? Well, here's a perfect example. Notice how specific it is. It names the exact standard, WCAG 2.1, and the target conformance level, AA. This kind of clarity is exactly what you should be aiming for. It leaves zero room for ambiguity.
Now that you've got your standards picked out, the next step is to get specific. You need to define two really key things: your scope, which is what the policy covers, and your conformance level, which is basically how well you plan to meet those standards.
So WCAG has 3 levels of conformance. Level A is the absolute bare minimum. Level AAA, that's the highest level. But honestly, it can be really difficult to achieve for all of your content. That's why Level A is the sweet spot. It's the accepted industry standard in most places, and it's the most realistic and robust target for the vast majority of organizations out there.
Next up is your scope, and you have to be explicit. Look at this example. It clearly states the policy covers all new, updated, and existing content. And it brilliantly highlights a detail that is so easy to miss, but it's absolutely crucial: internal sites. Don't forget about your intranet. Your own employees need access too.
So, when you're defining that scope, a good way to think about it is in these 3 steps. First, all your new and updated content has to conform from day one. Easy enough? Second, you gotta have a plan for all that older legacy content. And third, and this is the tricky one, what about content you don't fully control? Things like embedded social media feeds or third-party payment gateways? Your policy needs to have a plan for those too.
You know the saying, a plan without a deadline is just a wish? Well, this section is where your policy gets real. You have to set clear, measurable, and realistic timelines for achieving your goals.
A staged approach is a fantastic strategy here. This timeline shows a company aiming for level A first, which lets them tackle the biggest barriers pretty quickly. Then, 6 months later, they aim for the full level AA. This makes a huge, kind of scary project feel totally manageable, and it shows you're making steady progress.
And check this out. Your milestones aren't just for you. This is what I find so smart about this approach.
They can and they should apply to your suppliers. This example puts a deadline on vendors to declare their own accessibility plans. You're using your purchasing power to push for accessibility across the entire ecosystem. It's a total power move.
So, you've launched your policy. You're done, right? Not quite. A policy is a living, breathing commitment. This final section is all about making sure it stays effective and relevant over time.
So what does good maintenance actually look like? Well, first, you got to schedule regular formal reviews, at least once a year. Next, create a super clear and easy-to-find way for users to give you feedback. Then, build accessibility checks directly into your publishing workflow, so it just becomes second nature. And finally, be ready to update the policy as standards evolve.
A feedback policy like this one is the gold standard. It doesn't just ask for feedback, it actually commits to a response time. That shows your users that you're listening and that you really value their experience. It builds trust and helps you find and fix barriers you might have completely missed.